In the middle of Tech Plaza, white billionaire Lauren Kingsley was power walking toward a shareholder summit when her $4.5 million supercar coughed, spat smoke, and died in front of a forest of phones and live streams. Security froze. Assistants froze. The crowd did not. Screens went up, lenses zoomed in, fingers hovered over "Go Live." Only one person moved. A tall black man in a shredded navy coat stepped out of the shadows near the fountain, lifted a hand slightly and said in a voice steady enough to cut through the noise, "I can fix it." Lauren didn't even look fully at him at first. The plaza laughed for her. It always did. They weren't laughing long, because as the smoke thickened and turned a strange blue-gray, it became painfully clear. The man she had just dismissed as street trash was the only one who understood what was happening inside the most advanced engine on Earth, and the empire that ran on it. Before we dive into how everything unraveled and rebuilt, do not forget to subscribe and tell us where you're watching from. Because somewhere out there, another story just like this is waiting to happen. The engine had screamed before it died. A sharp high note tore out of the Helix Phantom's core, then dropped into silence so abrupt it sucked the sound out of Tech Plaza. A sleek ribbon of blue-gray vapor curled from under the hood, slicing through the morning chatter like a distress flare. Heads turned, drones pivoted, tripods shifted. At the center of it all, Lauren Kingsley, founder and CEO of Orion Dynamics, the woman whose name sat on half the city's patents, stood beside her silver Helix Phantom as if she'd just watched her reputation collapse in real time. "No, I don't care what it costs. I want a team here now," she snapped into her phone, the sharp, polished edge of her voice riding on panic she refused to acknowledge. Her chief of staff stammered something about congestion, about technicians rerouted, about an ETA. 2 hours? Lauren's jaw clenched. "I have investors flying in before that. Do you understand what this morning is?" She ended the call with a jab so hard the reflection in the Phantom's chrome door shook. Around her, the plaza's giant hollow billboards kept looping Orion ads. Smooth launches, smiling engineers, glowing charts. All of it felt like a cruel joke. For Lauren, control wasn't just a preference, it was a brand. She was the woman who didn't miss flights, who didn't move meetings, whose machines did not break in public. And now, under the cold glare of hovering camera drones and 100 strangers hungry for spectacle, she was losing both control and the illusion of perfection. Then a voice floated in from behind the haze. Calm, unhurried, wrong for the moment. "Careful, ma'am. That color means your secondary flux loop has a microfracture. The blue-gray in the exhaust is coolant vaporizing on the heat shield." The words were so specific, so technical, that for a second Lauren thought they came from her earpiece. They didn't. She turned sharply. A man stood a few paces away, just outside the line where security had tensed up. Dark-skinned, mid-40s, maybe older. His coat had once been navy. Now it was just tired fabric and frayed seams. A reusable grocery bag hung from one arm. His beard was uneven, his eyes too clear for someone the city had written off. He didn't step closer. He looked like someone who had been punished enough times for stepping forward too soon. "Don't touch my car," Lauren cut in, the embarrassment burning behind her ribs, hardening her tone into something sharper than anger. He stopped where he was, palms relaxing open in the air. He hadn't moved toward the Phantom at all, but she needed him further away, needed the distance between everything she had and everything he didn't. "I'm not touching anything," he said softly. "I'm just telling you what you're looking at." Phones lifted higher. A ring formed around them. You can feel when a crowd decides something is content, not reality. Lauren felt the shift like a chill. This is the clip they'll loop, she thought. The billionaire, the broken car, the homeless man she bites the head off. "Who are you?" she demanded, each word dipped in contempt. "And why are you even near my vehicle?" His gaze didn't flinch. "Trying to help," he answered. "If you keep running diagnostics, the coolant breach in the tertiary chamber will cascade. You've got maybe 40 minutes before the core cooks itself." Lauren let out a laugh that sounded more like a crack. 40 minutes, and let me guess. You're an expert on multi-million-dollar quantum drives. "Something like that," he replied. That something threaded through sirens in the distance, through murmurs, through the ticking clock of her meeting. His voice didn't rise, didn't plead. It simply existed, steady, like he'd said these warnings before, and knew how they usually ended. She didn't hear the precision in his estimate. She only saw what everyone else saw, A man with no address standing too close to something worth more than his life. Security is on the way, she muttered, mostly to herself, turning her shoulder as if that could downgrade him back to background scenery. The man lowered his hands but didn't retreat. He'd expected this. He'd seen the same disbelief on a dozen faces since the day his career disappeared with a single headline. He could still hear the language of engines in his head. He could still see equations behind every whine and rattle. The Helix Phantom sputtered again. The smoke thickened to the exact shade he'd described. He inhaled once. Slow, practiced. People and machines both had a breaking point where pride gave way to physics. Engines didn't negotiate. Neither did time. Somewhere between her anger and his patience, the world seemed to hold its breath. Hours before Lauren's car choked on the plaza tiles, the man had already been there. His name was Darius Cole, but no one in Tech Plaza knew that. To most, he was the shape on the bench near the fountain every morning, another invisible life on the city's margins. He came early, before the holograms burned to full brightness. The plaza pulsed with predicted routines. Commuters, drones, vendors. The hum of engines warming for another day of moving money and people. It was loud, but the noise made sense. Machines always did. Darius sat on the low stone lip of the fountain, grocery bag against his leg. Inside were the constants of his stripped-down life. A folded tarp, a stubby screwdriver wrapped in cloth, a stack of hand-sketched diagrams. Little islands of order in the sea of chaos. Then he heard it. A sound that didn't belong to this morning, but to another life. A smooth electric hum slid between the voices and footsteps, flawless at first. Then it hesitated, not enough for anyone else to notice, but enough to split his focus in two. He lifted his head. The Helix Phantom glided into the plaza like arrogance on wheels. Liquid silver, violent curves, blue luminescent striping. One of only 8 in existence, and he knew the beating heart under its skin better than anyone staring at it with their mouths open. Because years ago, long before his ID badge stopped working and his access codes were revoked, Darius Cole had helped design the cooling lattice that sat at the core of that engine. He knew the flaw before the smoke appeared. The tone was wrong, strained, uneven, like a breath held too long. The Phantom rolled to a stop in front of the steps. A thin ribbon of blue-gray rose from the hood, twisting lazily up through the chilled air. Darius felt the answer in his chest before his mind supplied the math. Secondary loop, he thought. Same alloy, same stress point, same mistake. The weakness was exactly where his old report, buried in some digital graveyard, had warned it would be. He stood. Years of learned caution told him to stay out of it. People didn't want salvation from a man with no address. They wanted distance. But the other instinct, the one he'd never managed to kill, was stronger. The instinct to fix. I really can fix it, he said when he reached the edge of the commotion. Lauren's head snapped back toward him. Excuse me, she said, more offended than curious. Your cooling loop has a hairline crack, he repeated, voice even. It's dumping coolant into the tertiary chamber. That's why your exhaust is that exact shade. You're watching it vaporize on the heat shield. The crowd had gone quieter again, hungrily listening. And how long before your imaginary crack destroys my engine? She asked. 40 minutes, Darius replied. Your onboard systems already warned you. 45 minutes to irreversible failure, he added. That was about 5 minutes ago. For just a heartbeat, something flickered in her expression. Recognition. She glanced at the heads-up display glowing faintly through the tinted glass, saw the red code still pulsing, and then almost visibly slammed the door on whatever doubt had crept in. You must have guessed that from the smoke, she said, forcing a scoff. I don't guess, Darius answered. I helped build the architecture this car sits on. That landed differently. This Helix Phantom runs an upgraded version of NovaFlux's X-series cooling network, he continued. Same alloy in the secondary loop, same stress line on the junction. The one I flagged in an internal memo, code XF472. Lauren's fingers tightened around her phone. XF472. The number wasn't random. It fluttered up from the depths of memory. Acquisition files, legacy documentation from a company they'd bought and quietly gutted. The code had been a footnote even then. How do you know that tag? She asked slowly. Because I wrote it, Darius said. For a moment, the plaza went still. You could hear the drones humming, the fountain splashing, someone's coffee cup hit the ground and roll. Then came the heavy footfalls of security cutting through the murmur. 2 guards in dark jackets and earpieces pushed their way through the crowd, eyes already locked on the only person here who didn't look like he belonged. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step back," the taller one said, planting himself between Darius and the car. Lauren saw them arrive and did not call them off. Her instincts screamed for control. Control meant authority. Authority meant distance. Distance meant pretending this man and his frighteningly precise knowledge were not her problem. Darius lifted his hands again, palms open. "I'm not touching the vehicle," he said. "I'm telling her how to keep it from tearing itself apart in front of the entire city." "Ma'am, is this individual harassing you?" the second guard asked Lauren, already half decided on the answer. She hesitated for half a second. That was all. Darius seized the tiny gap. "If that fracture grows," he said, "you lose your cooling core. 800 grand in parts. 11 weeks minimum to replace. You miss your investor summit today, and the next contract dominoes with it." Lauren's head snapped toward him. "How do you know about my meeting?" she demanded. "You said you have investors landing," he replied calmly. "Your assistant just told you your team is 2 hours out, but your engine has 38 minutes before the damage becomes permanent. The math isn't subtle. Run a background check," Lauren said quietly to the taller guard. "Yes, ma'am." He stepped away, already speaking into his radio. The other guard stayed close, squaring his shoulders. "Don't move," he instructed, low and hard. Darius didn't. He stood straight, hands open, the tension in his shoulders buried beneath something colder and more practiced. This wasn't the first time he'd been treated as a problem instead of a solution. "If I wanted to hurt your car," he said quietly, "I'd have kept my mouth shut and watched." The guard ignored him. A minute later, the taller officer came back, jaw tight, phone in hand. "ID?" Lauren asked. He shook his head. "No current address on file, no valid ID, no employer records in the last 3 years. Last registered job, Novaflux Labs. Terminated after internal investigation. No rehire status. Credentials listed as inactive." The words hung like a sentence being read. The crowd rustled. Little chuckles, knowing murmurs. Homeless, fired, off the grid. The story wrote itself. Lauren exhaled through her nose, slow and cold. "Exactly," the shorter guard said. "These guys make up stories all the time. Say whatever they need to get close." Darius looked between them, then back at her. "I'm not here for your money or your pity," he said. "I'm here because I cannot stand there and watch an avoidable failure. That's all." "I'm sure you believe that," Lauren replied, her voice going smooth and icy. "But I cannot risk a stranger tampering with hardware no one outside this company has clearance for. Not today." He tried once more, not with anger, but with detail. "If that loop ruptures," he said softly, "it will eat your thrust bearings, overheat the core, and trip every failsafe until the entire system shuts down. You will not drive that car for months. You may not recover this morning's deal." The guard stepped closer. "Sir, that's enough." Lauren straightened, armor snapping back into place. "I'm sorry for the misunderstanding," she said, polite and lethal. "Please escort him away from the vehicle." Darius didn't argue. He looked at the shimmering hood, at the twisting smoke, and then back at her. "You're making the same choice they made at Novaflux," he said quietly, ignoring a crack because the wrong person pointed at it. Her jaw tightened. "Step back, Mr. Cole," he supplied. "Darius Cole. Step back, Mr. Cole." He nodded once. No heat, no theatrics. Just a small surrender he'd rehearsed too many times. 36 minutes, he murmured. He let the guards walk him to the edge of the crowd. The plaza's noise seeped back in. Whispers, laughter, the low whine of an engine in slow collapse. Lauren turned away, lifting her phone again, redialing any number that felt like it could fix this without undermining her. Behind her, Darius watched the vapor thicken, watched the phantom tremble. The instinct to fix didn't vanish just because he'd been dismissed. It sat in his chest like a ticking bomb. The car coughed, a ragged metallic sound that made several people flinch. Lauren's voice sharpened into her phone. "Where is my backup crew? I was told—" Static crackled. Then her chief of staff answered, strained. "Lauren, every tech unit is locked at the R&D site. The new prototype had a critical fault. They can't release anyone for at least 2 hours." "That is not an option," she hissed. A harsh chime cut her off. The Phantom's internal display flashed red. A robotic voice announced for everyone close enough to hear, "Warning. Total system failure projected in 37 minutes. Lauren froze. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. 37, not 50, not 90. The same number Darius had thrown out like he could see into the engine's bones. She turned her head slowly toward him. He stood where the guards had left him, hands still visible, eyes searching her face, not the cameras. It says 37 minutes, she called louder than she meant to. He didn't smirk. He didn't say, I told you so. Then the fracture has started propagating, he answered. You're already losing the window. The taller guard shifted nervously. Ma'am, it's not safe for you to stand this close anymore. We should move you back and wait. Wait for what? Lauren snapped. A fireball? Her mind spun through options, through contacts, through anyone who could confirm that this wasn't madness. Darius took a single step forward. Not enough for the guards to grab him, just enough to be heard. Call Dr. Keiko Tan, he said. Lauren blinked. Who? Dr. Keiko Tan, he repeated. Chief Propulsion Architect at Vantage. Tell her Darius Cole is here and ask if I'm qualified to touch that engine. I am not calling a competitor in the middle of a crisis, Lauren snapped. You're not calling a competitor, Darius said. You're calling the only person in this city who knows my work as well as I do. You're running out of time, Ms. Kingsley. You can spend it on pride if you like. The engine doesn't care. The way he said it, calm, not cruel, landed harder than an insult. Her throat tightened. Her mind did the math again. 37 minutes. No internal team. A plaza full of watchers. A board full of investors expecting her on a stage, not in a viral disaster clip. She scrolled through her contacts with shaking fingers, found a number she never used but always kept, and pressed call. Tan, a clipped voice answered on the second ring. Dr. Tan, this is Lauren Kingsley from Orion Dynamics, she said, forcing steel into her tone. I need to confirm something urgently about a former NovaFlux engineer. Name, Darius Cole. The silence stretched just long enough to sting. Then came a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Darius? Keiko Tan repeated, her professional mask cracking audibly. You're with him right now? Yes, Lauren replied. He claims he can stabilize a Helix Phantom core in the field. He's already interfaced with... He's not claiming, Keiko cut in, voice suddenly fierce. He can. If he says your loop is fractured, it is. If he says you have 37 minutes, you probably have less. The guards exchanged a look. Even the crowd seemed to lean in. Lauren's fingers tightened around the phone. The NovaFlux file is a corporate invention, Keiko snapped. Listen to me very carefully, Lauren. Darius Cole is the best thermal systems engineer I have ever worked with. Half of our orbital fleet still runs on curves he wrote. If your Phantom is failing in public, he's not your risk, he's your lifeline. Lauren swallowed. The ground under her pride shifted. I didn't know, she said quietly. Of course you didn't, Keiko replied, her tone softening with something like regret. They buried him. They buried the audit that cleared him. We should have looked harder. Tell him that for me. The noise of the plaza faded around Lauren. For a moment, it was just her, the dying machine, and the sound of a woman she respected more than anyone vouching for the man she'd just tried to have removed. Dr. Tan, she said, you're sure about this? I'm sure about exactly one thing, Keiko said. If you don't let him work, you'll be watching your flagship engine melt down on 100 live feeds. Let Darius fix it, then get out of his way. The line clicked. Lauren kept the phone to her ear for a second longer, as if she could hold on to its certainty. Then she lowered it. The guards watched her, waiting for the order that would tell them who she really was under all the branding. Stand down, Lauren said, voice smaller but clearer than before. Ma'am, the taller one asked. You heard me. Step back. No one touches the car except Mr. Cole. They obeyed, more out of surprise than respect. Lauren turned to Darius. For the first time, she really looked at him. Not at the coat, not at the bag, but at the man. I misjudged you, she said, the words tasting unfamiliar in her mouth. I saw what I wanted to see. Homeless, he finished evenly. Dangerous, unreliable. Her throat tightened. Yes. She dropped her gaze for a heartbeat, then forced it back up. I don't know how to apologize for that. You don't have to, he said gently. Just listen this time. The Phantom rattled violently, making them both flinch. The display flashed again. System failure projected in 35 minutes, the synthetic voice announced. Lauren looked at the timer, then at him. What do we do now, she whispered. Darius stepped toward the car, his eyes already mapping the work ahead. Now, he said, calm and certain, we fix it. And for the first time that morning, Lauren stepped aside. Heat rolled off the Helix Phantom in suffocating waves as Darius stepped up to the hood. Up close, the engine's faint hum sounded less like power and more like a labored breath. The blue-gray smoke twisted up in thin ribbons, each curl another second lost. How does someone like you end up out here? Lauren asked suddenly. the question slipping out before her filter could catch it. Darius didn't answer at once. His hands were already moving, fingers gliding along the seam of the access panel, listening with his skin as much as his ears. Same way any complex system fails, he said at last. A tiny crack spreads. A bad assumption gets baked into the model. By the time anyone notices, the whole structure is unstable. That's not an answer, she murmured. He glanced up at her, the corners of his mouth barely moving. False accusation, he said simply. They needed a villain, and I fit the budget line. Her brows knit. They cleared you later, didn't they? 2 years later, he replied. By then, the story everyone remembered was the first one. He said it without bitterness. Just fact. Like a man reading numbers off a screen. A fresh warning flashed on the Phantom's display. System degradation accelerating. 33 minutes to critical failure. The crowd shifted uneasily. Somewhere, a child asked in a small voice if the car was going to explode. Darius rolled his shoulders back. Emergency toolkit, he said. Rear compartment. Bring it here. Lauren blinked at the way he spoke. No please. No deference, just crisp instructions. The tone of someone used to being obeyed in labs and launch bays. She hesitated, then moved, tapping the hidden panel at the back of the car. It hissed open to reveal a sleek black case. She grabbed it and carried it over to him, the weight surprising her. He knelt on the tiles and snapped it open. Inside, tools and supplies gleamed in molded foam. Sealant vials, thermal gloves, fiber patches, micro spanners. Good, he murmured. Sealant compound, fiber mesh, pressure clamps. His brow furrowed. But I'll need graphite. Graphite? Lauren repeated. We're fixing a quantum engine, not doing a sketch. High-grade graphite, Darius clarified. Mars Lumograph, 8B if possible. Those are pencils, her assistant blurted from behind her. The art store across the street sells them. Then go, Darius said without looking up. Box of 8B, move. The young man looked at Lauren, uncertain. She nodded once. Run, put it on my tab. He sprinted off, almost colliding with a bystander. Lauren watched Darius line the tools beside the car in a neat row, each one placed with care. His sleeves were pushed up now. His forearms were corded with lean muscle, small burn scars and faint lines tracing years of work that no one in this plaza had seen. You really think you can save it with pencils and patch kits? She asked, quieter now. I don't think, he said, eyes on the engine. I calculate. Big difference. He slid on the thermal gloves and worked the hood release. The panel rose with a low hiss. Heat hit them like a physical shove. The air above the engine rippled, warping the reflections of glass towers around them. Darius leaned in, face inches from components worth more than the entire plaza's annual wages combined. He didn't flinch. Pressure readings, Lauren said automatically, falling into the pattern of lab speak despite herself. He watched the gauge through the heat shimmer. Peaking, he muttered. We bleed it down first, or the fracture eats the joint. He turned a small valve slowly. A thin stream of invisible pressure hissed out. The gauge needle dipped, then bounced. Hold it, he murmured, making micro-adjustments. Lauren realized she'd stopped breathing. You move like you've done this 100 times, she said. I have, he replied. Just never with a crowd waiting to see if they should duck. His mouth twitched at his own joke. He reached deeper into the engine bay, clearing a small access port with 2 quick motions. What really happened at NovaFlux? She asked, voice low enough that only he could hear. He kept working. A supervisor overrode a safety lock to hit a launch window, he said. I documented the risk. I refused to sign off. They ran the test anyway. He tightened a clamp, checked a junction, continued calmly. The system overheated, he went on. Alarms, shutdown, investigation. No lives lost, but somebody had to pay for the scare. My name was on the loudest warning. That made me convenient. They fired you for being right? Lauren whispered. They fired me for refusing to sign their lie, Darius said. The investigation cleared me 2 years later. By then, every hiring manager had read the first headline 3 dozen times and missed the correction at the bottom of page 8. He checked the gauge again, then nodded. Pressures at a survivable level, he said. Now we reinforce the fracture before it runs. As if summoned by the word, Lauren's assistant pushed through the crowd, slightly out of breath, holding a small blue and white box. Graphite, he panted. 8B, just like you said. Good man, Darius said, taking it. He flipped the lid, pulled out 3 pencils, and snapped them in half with clean, efficient motion. The crack of wood and graphite echoed faintly. He scraped the soft, dark cores into an empty vial, then poured in a portion of the emergency sealant. The mixture turned into a thick, metallic paste as he stirred it with a fine tool. Lauren watched, fascinated despite her fear. You're really going to patch a multi-million-dollar cooling loop with a glue you made from pencil lead, she said. He glanced up briefly. Engineering isn't about having the perfect tool, he said. It's about understanding what you have well enough to bend it to your will. That line hung in the air longer than any corporate slogan she'd ever written. He returned his focus to the engine, narrowing his eyes at a narrow curve of metal where 3 lines met. Here, he murmured. Just like before. He carefully applied the graphite sealant mixture along an invisible hairline in the loop junction, layering it in slow, deliberate strokes, letting it seep exactly where it needed to. The crowd had gone eerily quiet. The plaza, normally a sea of motion and noise, had become a theater. Every breath, every movement, every tweak of his wrist was being documented by dozens of lenses. It still doesn't explain how you ended up on a bench with a bag instead of in a lab, Lauren said softly. Losing a job is one thing, Darius replied, still working. Losing your name is another. He smoothed the last of the mixture into place. The house went first, he said, then the savings. Friends stopped returning calls. Recruiters stopped saying, "We'll be in touch." Doors that used to open just slid right past my face like I didn't exist. He sat back on his heels for a moment, fingers flexing. They took the title, the access, the badge, he said, but they couldn't take the work out of my head. That's what kept me sane. Lauren stared at him, the weight of her own earlier assumptions pressing down like extra gravity. I'm sorry, she said quietly. He shook his head once. You didn't build the system, he said. You just believed in it. That's how most harm happens. Good people who never look under the hood. Behind them, a new voice cut in, sharp and commanding. Step away from the vehicle. Darius didn't have to turn to know the type. He recognized the cadence. Corporate security with authority, not mall cops. A tall man in a dark gray suit approached, 2 Orion security specialists flanking him. His ID badge gleamed. Greg Reynolds, Executive Security Director. Lauren's stomach sank. Reynolds did not show up for minor issues. Reynolds, she said tightly, this is under control. It will be, he replied coolly, eyes pinned to Darius's gloved hands buried in the Phantom's core. As soon as the unknown party interfering with restricted hardware steps away. He folded his arms. Who is he? Reynolds asked. Lauren opened her mouth, but Darius answered first. Someone keeping your engine from tearing itself apart in front of your shareholders, he said. That isn't a name, Reynolds said. He nodded to one of the guards. Visual ID. The guard raised a handheld scanner. Lauren stepped between them, surprising even herself. Wait, she said. His name is Darius Cole. He was a lead thermal consultant at NovaFlux. Reynolds' eyes narrowed. The same engineer flagged in the NovaFlux coolant scandal, he said, and you have him hands deep in our prototype in the middle of a public plaza. He didn't cause that failure, Lauren said sharply. He warned them about it. Reynolds didn't blink. That depends on which version of the file you read, he replied. My job is not to adjudicate history. It's to keep unauthorized hands off proprietary tech. The Phantom gave a harsh shudder. The gauge needle jumped. 26 minutes to critical, the car announced dispassionately. If I wanted to sabotage it, Darius said calmly, I would have walked away when your team told me to. Or maybe you want it to fail on your terms, Reynolds shot back. Slowly, controllably, harder to trace. He stepped closer to Lauren. Miss Kingsley, if this man continues to work on that engine with your blessing and something goes wrong, every bit of liability will sit on your desk. Lauren's throat went dry. It wasn't just fear. Reynolds was speaking the language of boardrooms and lawsuits, the world she knew how to navigate. He was giving her the safe corporate play. Do nothing, accept the loss, Blame the unforeseeable. Darius watched the temperature climb. 15 minutes before the loop hits critical stress, he said quietly. 14 if we keep arguing. Data? Reynolds demanded. The guard with the tablet synced it to the car's diagnostics. Numbers crawled up in red. His face tightened. He's not wrong, the guard muttered. Pressure, temperature, flow curves. It's all spiking just like he said. Reynolds stared at the screen, then at Darius. How do you know those numbers without access? He asked. You have no login, no terminal, no tools except a patch kit and stolen office supplies. Because I designed the ratios those numbers orbit, Darius answered. Coolant flow, alloy thresholds, fail-safe margins. I know the system's heartbeat because I helped wire its veins. Reynolds let out a humorless breath. So this is what NovaFlux's ghost looks like, he said. He turned to Lauren. You have two options, he said, voice low enough that only she and Darius could hear. Let a disgraced engineer with no clearance keep tinkering or lock down the scene, take the PR hit, and fight another day. Which risk do you want to explain to the board? The worst part was how rational he sounded. Lauren stared at the Phantom, at the smoke, at the circling drones. She could already see the headlines. Experimental engine meltdown, CEO gambles with public safety, NovaFlux engineer at center of new scandal. Darius saw her pivot, the subtle shift in her eyes as fear of blame began to outweigh fear of failure. He set his wrench down carefully beside the toolkit. You don't have to decide, he said. You already have. Step away from the vehicle, Mr. Cole, Reynolds said. Now. Darius stripped off the gloves and placed them gently on the tiles. When that coolant hits critical, he said, the tertiary loop collapses. The core overheats. You lose the engine for at least 3 months. If we're lucky, it just dies quietly. If we're not, we'll wait for the manufacturer's team. Reynolds cut him off. They're 2 hours away on a good day, Darius said. You have... What is it now? The Phantom chimed. 13 minutes to critical failure. That, Darius finished. He stepped back, hands empty, shoulders loose. You don't need me to convince you, he told Lauren. The machine will do it. He started to walk away. Lauren watched him go, her heart hammering, her head a battlefield between two worlds. The world of legal memos and risk matrices, and the world under that hood slowly tearing itself apart. The Phantom gave a sharp metallic crack. The gauge needle slammed toward the red. The crowd gasped. Alarm tones screamed through the plaza. Coolant breach imminent. 4 minutes to core meltdown, the voice inside the car announced. Reynolds paled visibly. This is not possible, he stammered. Heat blasted out from the vents, thick and aggressive. Rin, it's going to blow, someone shouted from behind him. For a split second, all the noise blurred. Sirens, voices, clicking shutters. One sound cut through it for Lauren, her own voice, hoarse and scared. Darius, wait. He stopped but didn't turn. The engine roared like a wounded animal. Blue-gray vapor poured out in a darker, thicker plume. Darius closed his eyes for half a heartbeat. Not in triumph, in mourning. He'd seen this pattern before, a system ignored until it became a spectacle. Then he turned around and walked straight back into the heat. The crowd parted, silent. Reynolds moved to intercept. You are not... Manual override, Darius snapped at Lauren, his tone like a command, not a request. Now. She didn't question it this time. Her fingers flew over the console. Manual override granted, the car's AI said. Darius ripped open the emergency access panel. Scalding steam burst out. The front row onlookers flinched back, shielding their faces. He didn't move. Coolant pressure's peaking, he announced. We bleed first, then refill. He grabbed a valve key and thrust it toward Lauren. O port B, he said. Turn slowly. If you over-open, you'll flash freeze the chamber. Her hands trembled as she obeyed. A shimmering stream of metallic blue coolant flowed into the emergency catch tray. The smell of hot metal and reactive chemicals filled the air, sharp enough to taste. Keep it steady, Darius murmured. We save 60%, dump the rest. 3 minutes to core meltdown, the AI intoned. Not today, Darius muttered. He redirected the salvaged coolant into a clean container, then grabbed a fresh, sealed canister from the kit. His movements were fast but never frantic. Every action had a purpose. "Come on," he whispered to the engine, watching the gauge. The temperature needle flickered at the red line, then dipped a fraction. "Pressure slowing," he said. "Good. Now we give it new blood." He started refilling the core with the recovered coolant mixed with the fresh supply, one steady pour at a time. The hum under the hood shifted, from chaotic roar to a hesitant roll, like a heart trying to find a rhythm again. 60 seconds, Lauren breathed. He adjusted the intake valve, listened, adjusted again. It was like watching someone tune an instrument only they could hear. "Listen to it," he said quietly. "Not the numbers. The numbers confirm. The sound tells the truth first." He tightened the last clamp, wiped his forehead with his sleeve, and exhaled. "Okay," he said. "When I say start ignition, not before. Understand?" She nodded, throat too tight for words. He glanced at the countdown on the display. 50 seconds. He pressed his gloved hand flat against the access panel, feeling for vibrations. 40. The hum deepened, smoothing. 30. He looked up, met her eyes. "Now or never," he said. She hit the ignition. For a terrifying second, the phantom screamed, metal scraping against metal, a sound like tearing steel. Then, the world dropped into a thin, unnatural silence. Lauren's stomach hollowed. "It's dead," she whispered. Darius didn't move. He kept his hand on the panel, eyes closed. A low vibration started under his palm, tentative at first, then stronger. A deep, rolling purr built from the core outward, smoothing into a confident hum. The red lights on the display blinked off, one by one. Amber, then green. "Coolant flow stabilized," the AI reported. "System performance limited to 70%. Lauren sagged, her legs nearly giving out. 70%, she said, disbelief and relief tangling. "That's exactly what you said it could hold." Darius stepped back, peeling off his gloves. Graphite streaks and sealant stains marked his skin. "I told you," he said quietly. "The system is stronger than its crack if you stop pretending the crack isn't there." The crowd erupted. Cheers, applause, shouts of, "Did you get that?" and "Send me the clip," roared through the plaza. Someone whooped. Someone else started crying from sheer adrenaline. Reynolds stood frozen, color drained from his face. "You were lucky," he said weakly. Darius met his gaze, expression calm and tired. "No," he replied. "I was right." Lauren wasn't listening to Reynolds anymore. Her focus had narrowed to the man in the faded coat with graphite on his hands, who had just saved her engine, her morning, and possibly her company. "You just rebuilt my cooling core in under half an hour," she said softly, "with an emergency toolkit and art supplies." He gave her a faint, crooked smile. "Money buys hardware," he said. "Understanding keeps it alive." She swallowed hard. "You didn't just fix a car," she said. "You saved my reputation, my quarter, maybe more." He shrugged, but his eyes were serious. "I fixed what was in front of me," he said. "That's the job, whether you get paid for it or not." For the first time in a very long time, Lauren Kingsley, who thought she'd already learned every possible lesson about power, risk, and control, felt something unfamiliar. Humility. "Come with me," she said suddenly. He frowned. "Where?" "To Orion," she replied. "To my tower. I have a room full of people who think they know everything about this engine. You're the only one who just proved it." He looked down at his coat, his faded shirt, his worn sneakers. "You want to walk me into your boardroom like this?" he asked. "You're coming as the man who saved my flagship in public," Lauren said. "You don't need to look like them. You just need them to listen." He huffed a small laugh. "And you think they will?" She held his gaze. "I think," she said, "that after today, I can make them." He studied her for a long second, as if weighing not just the offer, but the risk of hope. Then Darius Cole nodded. "All right," he said, "but I'm not your prop." Her lips twitched. "And I'm not your redemption arc," she replied. "We're even." The Helix Phantom purred behind them, steady and subdued. As security cleared a path through the crowd, Lauren and Darius walked side by side toward the waiting convoy. Phones tracked them until the doors closed. No one in Tech Plaza could guess that the real explosion was still in front of them. inside a glass-walled room 30 floors up, where money and fear usually spoke louder than truth. Today, for once, that balance was about to change. The ride to Orion Tower was strangely quiet. The city slid past in streaks of glass and steel. Lauren sat on the Phantom's passenger side now, letting a driver take the wheel. She watched Darius in the reflection of the window. He held his grocery bag on his lap, fingers resting lightly on the worn handles. "You hate this, don't you?" she asked. He raised an eyebrow without looking at her. "The car?" "The attention," she said. "The cameras, the deal, the whole circus." He considered. "I hate what it brings out in people," he said. "Fear dressed as arrogance. Desperation dressed as control." She inhaled, stung by how closely that described her morning. "When was the last time you were in a boardroom?" she asked. 3 years ago, he said. "Last day at Nova Flux. They read me the script. I refused to sign it. They closed the door behind me and changed the locks." "Did you fight it?" she asked quietly. "Legally? Publicly? Anything?" "I tried," and he said. "But the system is built to move fast when it punishes and slow when it corrects. By the time the truth limped out, the damage had already gone viral." The elevator from the garage shot them up to the executive floors. The doors opened on polished stone, quiet lighting, tastefully expensive furniture. People glanced up from their devices as Lauren walked by with a man in a tattered coat at her side. No one said anything, but she saw the flickers in their eyes. Her assistant hurried up, slightly disheveled. "Conference room is being prepped," she said in a rush. "Investors are already in the building. Also, Langford Atelier is here." "Good," Lauren said. "Set up a fitting in the green room." Darius half laughed. "You want to dress me up now?" he asked. "Will that make the math easier to swallow?" "It won't change the math," she said. "It'll change who they think should be talking about it." He studied her for a beat, then nodded. "Fine," he said. "Just don't make me into your mascot." "Believe me," she replied dryly, "I don't have time to write a campaign right now." Awesome. In the green room, a silent team from Langford Atelier was waiting. Tape measures, chalk, garment bags, and a rolling rack of dark suits. "Mr. Cole," the lead fitter said neutrally. "We'll need a few minutes." Darius hesitated, then set his grocery bag gently on a bench. "Don't lose that," he said quietly. Lauren's assistant stepped closer. "I'll lock it," she promised. 15 minutes later, Darius stepped out of the side room in a charcoal suit, crisp white shirt, no tie as requested. The transformation wasn't a movie montage. It was subtle, almost unsettling. His posture hadn't changed. His eyes hadn't changed. But every person who saw him suddenly recalibrated. "This is the trick," he said, tugging at the cuff. "You change the fabric, and the world pretends the man is new." Lauren looked at him, really looked, and shook her head. "No," she said. "The trick is remembering who the man was before the fabric." He held her gaze for a second. A flicker of something like gratitude passed between them and vanished. Her assistant checked her watch. "Boards assembling in 10, she said. "Slides loaded. Footage from the plaza queued." Lauren straightened, the familiar weight of leadership sliding back onto her shoulders. Only this time, it sat differently. Less like armor, more like responsibility. "Once we walk through that door," she told Darius, "they'll test you. They'll test me. Some of them will want you to fail quietly so they can forget what happened this morning. Don't give them the satisfaction." "I won't argue about my past in there," he said. "I'll talk about the work. That's all I have." "It's also all that matters," she said. "Let me handle everything else." They walked down the corridor together. At the end, tall glass doors stood half open, the low hum of voices spilling through the crack. "Last chance to bail," she said lightly. His mouth curved faintly. "You already dragged me out of exile," he said. "Might as well see if the kingdom's worth saving." They stepped inside. The Orion boardroom was a study in deliberate power. Glass walls with a view over the city, a long table of brushed steel and pale wood, leather chairs spaced with mathematical precision. At least a dozen people sat or stood in clusters, investors with carefully neutral faces, senior executives with devices in front of them, the CTO, a few advisors. At the head of the table sat Helena Morrow, Orion's board chair. Silver hair, sharp eyes, a folder in front of her she hadn't opened yet. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," Lauren began. Her voice didn't shake. She'd been doing this too long to let adrenaline bleed through. "We had a critical incident this morning involving our Helix Phantom flagship. It was contained. You're here to see how and why." She tapped her tablet. The wall display lit up with stills from Tech Plaza. Blue-gray smoke, warning codes, Darius standing near the car, security at his shoulder. A video clip began to play silently in the corner, showing him ripping open the access panel as the timer ticked down. A few investors shifted in their chairs. One scribbled notes before the presentation even started. "At 9:14, Lauren continued, "we experienced a catastrophic failure in the Phantom's cooling loop. At 9:17, our onboard AI projected total core meltdown within 37 minutes. Our internal response team was unavailable due to a concurrent incident at the R&D site." She paused. "At 9:52, the engine was stabilized at 70% capacity," she said, "without permanent damage." "And by whom?" asked a silver-haired man halfway down the table. "Was this miracle performed?" Lauren turned slightly toward her right. "By Darius Cole," she said, "the engineer who helped design the cooling architecture our system is built on." Murmurs. A pen clicked. Someone muttered Nova Flux under their breath. Helena's gaze drifted to Darius, weighing him in a single long glance. "Mr. Cole," she said, "we've seen your name in a very different context before." "You've seen a file," he replied calmly. "It doesn't tell you what I did, just what a committee needed to write." It was a dangerous line. Lauren's heart lurched, but she didn't step in. "What we need from you," said Orion's chief legal counsel, glasses low on his nose, "is clarity. Start with the facts. What was wrong with the engine, and what did you do to it?" Darius stepped forward until he stood in the light of the display. He didn't touch the table. His hands stayed at his sides. "Your secondary cooling loop developed a microfracture at the junction with the tertiary chamber," he said. "Alloy fatigue under sustained vibration at high heat. The stress pattern was the same one I documented years ago in NovaFlux's XF472 memo." He gestured to the schematic on the screen as it switched to a 3D model. "The fracture allowed coolant to bleed into the tertiary chamber and vent through the heat shield," he continued. "That's why you saw blue-gray vapor instead of white. Sensors detected the drift, but your filter treated it as noise. By the time the AI escalated the alert, failure was inevitable." "And your fix?" asked Sophia Malik, the CTO, leaning forward with sharp, focused eyes. "I bled off pressure to keep the crack from running, recovered as much coolant as possible, then used emergency sealant mixed with 8B graphite to reinforce the joint," Darius said. "Graphite provided flexible structural support within the sealant matrix, letting the bond hold under shifting loads without cracking again." "One of my analysts is going to have a stroke when he hears pencils in this recording," someone murmured. "Graphite," Sophia repeated. "Particle size, density, flow. It tracks. Why 8B specifically?" "Balance," Darius answered. "Soft enough to blend, dense enough to reinforce. 6B shears, 10B smears." Sophia sat back, lips pressed together, clearly running the math in her head. She nodded once. "That's not guesswork," she said. "That's lived experience." "And the NovaFlux scandal?" Another investor interjected, unwilling to leave that ghost unaddressed. "Their report blamed you for an almost identical failure." "Their report blamed me for refusing to sign off on a test that bypassed a failsafe," Darius said. "When the system overheated, they needed a person to absorb the impact. I was at the bottom of the hierarchy and the top of the warnings." Legal counsel frowned. "We have documents that—" "You have documents written to protect a launch window and a stock price," Darius said. His tone stayed level, almost gentle. "You also have access to the internal audit conducted 2 years later. It's on public record. That audit cleared me completely. And yet," one of the quieter investors said, "you're where you are." "Yes," Darius said, "because the correction never travels as far as the accusation. That's not an engineering problem. It's a human one." Silence fell over the table for a moment. Sophia broke it. "Set the past aside for a minute," she said. "Right now, I want the technical bottom line. Is the field patch stable?" "For the short term," Darius replied. Used hard, you have 3 weeks before you must install a permanent fix. Normal duty, 6. After that, the patch becomes a liability. And the permanent fix? Helena asked. Replace the rigid joint with a flex-stabilized insert, he said, highlighting the area on the display. Widen the tertiary buffer by 0.2 millimeters. Adjust the filter to treat early microdrift as priority signal, not noise. Run combined simulations instead of isolated ones. You'll increase endurance by a third and cut thermal strain in half. The Zurich-based investor with a habit of precise speech narrowed his eyes. You did that math in your head? He asked. I've had 3 years to replay the failure, Darius replied. Numbers are how I stay honest. Lauren watched the room carefully. Suspicion hadn't vanished, but something new had joined it. Respect, reluctant in some faces, eager in others. Let's address the risk, said a woman with a southern lilt and a hawk's gaze. Miss Kingsley, you let a man with a controversial file open your engine in public. Why should we believe this was anything but luck? Because luck doesn't calculate stress curves on the fly, Lauren answered. It doesn't predict time to failure to the minute. It doesn't improvise a field patch that aligns perfectly with post-event diagnostics. She looked down the table, meeting eyes one by one. You all know me, she said. You've watched me build Orion from slide decks to satellites. I don't bet the company on strangers or stories. I bet it on results and integrity. He showed both under pressure I'm not sure I could have handled. They watched her, the woman they'd staked millions on, the woman who almost never said, I'm not sure. Helena tapped the edge of her closed folder once. And what do you propose we do with Mr. Cole? She asked. First, Lauren said, we validate his fix in the lab, starting tomorrow morning. If the curves hold, we implement the joint redesign across all affected units. Second, we bring him on contract today, restricted access, focused scope. We let his mind work on the problems our pride has been too loud to hear. And long-term? Helena asked. Lauren paused, then glanced at Darius. He has something else, she said. It's not a product yet. It's a blueprint. Darius blinked, surprised to be thrown the floor so soon. A blueprint for what? The Southern investor asked. For repairing something bigger than one engine, he said slowly. For pulling talent back out of the cracks the system dropped it into. He slipped a small notebook from his jacket and opened it to a page dense with notes and a rough diagram. Call it a talent recovery initiative, he said. Engineers, researchers, builders who disappeared after one scandal, one illness, one wrong scapegoat. They're still out there, working gigs that don't use a tenth of what they know. People like me. You give them workspace, stable income, and protection from lazy headlines. In return, you get solutions no one else even knows how to frame. You want us to build a lab for exiles, someone said skeptically. I want you to stop throwing away minds because a story about them was more profitable than their work, Darius said. You're losing money, innovation, and whatever you think you stand for? Helena closed her folder fully now, no longer pretending to read. Miss Kingsley, she said, is this what you had in mind when you brought him here? In part, Lauren said. I invited him to save an engine. He did. Then he showed me notes he's been writing in shelters and on benches for 3 years. He's already mapped out teams, cost projections, integration points. He's done more thinking about our blind spots than most consultants do in a year. One of the older investors who'd been silent so far cleared his throat. If what he's saying about NovaFlux and his audit is true, he said, then whether we like it or not, we're looking at someone the industry wronged. Not just one industry, Darius said, but I'm not here to shake a fist at the past. I'm here because your engine was breaking in front of me, and I knew how to stop it. Everything else is, optional. Optional for you, the Southern investor said, not for us. If we attach our name to you and that file comes back to haunt us, we bleed for it. Then look, Darius said simply, pull the audit, pull the memos, pull Dr. Tan into a video call if you want. I won't ask you to take my word. Just don't pretend you can't check. Helena glanced at legal counsel, who was already making a note. The question isn't whether he's valuable, Sophia said quietly. We can see that. The question is whether we have the courage to let someone who fell out of the system help redesign it. Her words hung heavier than anyone's so far. Lauren felt dozens of eyes flick to her again. The woman who made the call in the plaza now had to make one in the tower. "I'm not asking you to knight him," she said. "I'm asking you to give him a lab, a badge, and metrics. We test the fix. We test the initiative. We don't have to believe in redemption stories to believe in data." Helena tapped her fingers once on the table, then stilled. "Here is my proposal," she said. "We approve immediate validation of the field repair. We authorize a 6-month contract for Mr. Cole, tied to technical milestones. During that time, we audit the NovaFlux record and evaluate his recovery proposal. At the end of 6 months, we decide whether to expand his role." Eyes turned to Darius. "And if I say no?" he asked. "Then we still validate your fix," Helena said, "and you walk back into a world that has made it very clear it doesn't know what to do with you." He stood very still. Lauren watched him weigh pride against opportunity, fear against responsibility. "I won't fight you for a title," he said at last. "I won't spend the next 6 months defending myself instead of working. If you bring me in, let it be for what I can build, not what I survived." "That's the only reason I'm interested," Helena said. "Can you live with that?" He nodded slowly. "Yes," he said, "as long as the work stays bigger than my name." The Southern investor smiled faintly. "Now there's a sentence you don't hear often around this table," she said. Helena looked around. "Objections?" she asked. There were some frowns, some pursed lips, a few reluctant nods, but no one raised a formal protest. "Then we move forward," Helena said. "Miss Kingsley, you'll coordinate with Mr. Cole on the validation schedule and the initial scope of his contract. Mr. Cole, protect the credibility you just earned. It will be watched." She rose, signaling the close of the formal session. The room dissolved into smaller clusters, investors whispering to advisors, executives tapping notes into devices, legal counsel already drafting frameworks in his head. Sophia crossed to Darius, hand extended. "I read your gradient papers when I was fresh out of grad school," she said. "It's clarifying to see the mind behind them still working." He shook her hand, grip firm but not performative. "Good to know somebody did," he said. She lowered her voice. "If you join, I'll clear space in the roadmap for fixing our test culture," she said. "We've been shipping too fast and listening too slow." "If I join," he replied, "I'll hold you to that." "I expect you to," she said, and walked away. Lauren waited until most of the room had emptied. "You kept your voice level when they pushed you," she said quietly. "Anger doesn't move numbers," he replied. "You could have torn into them about NovaFlux," she said, "about everything they're complicit in just by never asking questions." "I didn't come here to win a trial," he said. "I came here to keep an engine from becoming a crater." He slipped his notebook back into his pocket. "Validation lab, first thing tomorrow," he said. "Cooler temperatures, fewer distractions." "You're already scheduling my day," she said. "You asked for someone who knows what they're doing," he replied. "This is what that looks like." She almost smiled. "Tomorrow then," she said. He nodded. As they walked out side by side, past framed photos of launches and product reveals, past the glossy images of people Orion liked to celebrate, Lauren realized something she'd never had to face before. Her wealth, her power, her name, the things she'd always assumed were the highest currencies, had failed her at the plaza. The only thing that had mattered in the end was a mind the system had thrown away and a man who chose to step forward anyway. And that was a lesson money had never taught her. Morning light washed the Orion validation lab in pale silver. Darius stood alone at the primary console, sleeves rolled up, a paper cup of black coffee half empty beside him. His notebook lay open, pages crowded with equations, arrows, and rough boxes labeled with simple phrases. "Stop treating warning as noise. Don't waste people. Talent Recovery Initiative, Phase 1. He was tracing a finger along one of the diagrams when he heard the soft echo of footsteps behind him. "You were early," Lauren said. "You were late," he answered without turning. "It's 4 minutes to 8, she replied. "Exactly," he said, and set his pencil down. She moved to stand beside him. Today she wore a simple blazer, no jewelry, hair pulled back. Not the polished public CEO, the person who had stayed up reading his notes until almost dawn. "I read everything," she said quietly. "Twice." "And?" he asked. "It's not a proposal," she said. "It's a manifesto." He huffed a small breath. "I've had time to think," he said. "Sometimes the only way to stay sane is to keep writing down how the world should work, even when you're living proof it doesn't. He flipped to a page labeled Innovation Center Draft. The sketch was simple: an open lab space, smaller rooms branching out, notes scribbled in the margins. No suits required, one margin note read. No meetings about meetings. No press releases until the work is real. You want to build a center, she said, for people like you. For people like the version of me less stubborn than I was, he said. The ones who didn't have 3 years of savings or a second chance, or the sheer insanity to keep solving problems in their head while sleeping under fluorescent lights. He tapped a list of names on the next page. First names only, odd details beside each. Maya, bioinformatics. Ahmed, structural composites. Lena, signal processing. All people I met in shelters, food lines, night clinics. People who built things the world uses every day. People no one calls anymore. You've been recruiting from sidewalks, she said. I've been listening, he corrected. The world doesn't have a talent shortage, Lauren. It has an access problem. Brilliant minds get dropped when they're inconvenient, and everyone pretends they never existed. And you want Orion to fund a home for them, she said. Call it a lab built on repair instead of reputation, he said. A place where your worth is measured by what you can build now, not by the worst week of your life. She was quiet for a long moment. You're not angry, are you? She asked finally. No, he said. Anger burns fast and blinds deep. What I want isn't revenge, it's repair. The word landed heavier than any pitch deck slogan. Repair, she repeated softly, of engines and people. Same principle, he said. Find the crack. Stop pretending it isn't there. Reinforce what still works. Then build around the truth instead of the lie. She looked at him then, not as a CEO evaluating a consultant, but as a human being staring at another human being who had been crushed by the same machine she'd spent her life feeding. You realize what you're asking me to do, she said. Yes, he said. I'm asking you to trade a little of your safety for something that might actually matter. She let out a short, disbelieving laugh. You are impossible to say no to, she said. I've heard that before, he replied. Not in boardrooms, I suspect, she said. Not in ones I'm allowed to finish sentences in, he agreed. She held his gaze for a long moment, then extended her hand. Then let's start, she said. Not as CEO and contractor, as partners. He looked at her hand, then at her face. This was not charity, not pity. This was a woman who'd seen the limits of what money could fix, choosing to build something that didn't fit neatly into a quarterly report. Partners, he said quietly, and took her hand. Their handshake didn't feel like a deal closing. It felt like a fault line shifting. Outside the glass, the city went about its morning. People rushed, drones buzzed, engines hummed. None of them knew that in one bright room, two people who had both lost faith in the system were deciding to build something outside of it. How do we start, she asked. First, we prove I'm not crazy, he said. We run the validation on the Phantom's loop. If the curves hold, you can walk into any room and say this isn't a story. It's data. And then, she pressed, then, he said, we do something money almost never does. What's that? She asked. Give people back what it helped take, he said. The lab door slid open. Technicians filed in. Sophia arrived with a tablet in hand, two engineers at her heels. Morning, she said. We've got the Phantom strapped into the rig, sim parameters loaded. Ambient temp? Darius asked. 17 degrees Celsius, one of the techs replied. We can go lower if you want. This is fine for the first run, Darius said. Standard load, ramp to 80% over 20 minutes. Watch the junction here. He pointed to the projection on the wall, the same weak point he'd patched in the plaza. We're logging everything at high resolution, Sophia said. If your patch fails, we'll see it long before anything blows. If my patch fails, Darius said, I'll be the one to say it first. They took their positions. The test began. On the screen, curves began to climb. Temperature, pressure, flow. At first, everything looked textbook. Then the numbers approached the zone where yesterday's failure had started. Lauren felt her pulse pick up. There, she whispered, but the curve bent where it had shattered before. Pressure rose, stabilized, then flattened into a steady line. The patch is holding, one of the techs breathed. Keep going, Darius said. Let it sit. Don't rush past the dangerous part just because you're scared of it. Minutes ticked by. The engine hummed in its harness, a caged beast running full tilt. Finally, Sophia nodded. Shut it down, she said. Let's see the logs. The data poured in. Heat maps, stress graphs, strain calculations. Darius scanned them like most people skim headlines. Insert redesign will bring these numbers down even further, he said. But for a field patch, this is about as clean as it gets. Sophia turned to Lauren. He's right, she said. The failure mode is controlled. The joint redesign he sketched out will buy us more safety margin than we've had since the first prototype. Lauren exhaled slowly, feeling a knot behind her ribs loosen. Then we move, she said. We redesign the joint, we push the update through the line, and we document the hell out of how we got here. And the initiative? Darius asked softly. She looked at him, then at the team, then back. We start small, she said. One lab, pilot program. You pick the first 3 names on that list you think we shouldn't waste. I'll find the budget. Sophia raised an eyebrow. You're really doing this? She asked. I watched us almost blow up a flagship because we ignored the wrong voice, Lauren said. We're not doing that again if I can help it. She glanced at the techs, at the way they were looking at Darius now, with a mix of curiosity, respect, and something else. Recognition. Most of us are one bad rumor away from the bench, one tech muttered. Kinda nice to imagine a world where that's not the end. That's the point, Darius said. The system shouldn't be allowed to discard you so completely that your only lab is your own head. He turned back to Lauren. You know this won't be easy, he said. You'll have shareholders asking why you're paying for damaged goods. You'll have PR telling you to wrap it in some feel-good campaign about second chances and diversity and whatever buzzword is trending this quarter. We can let them write whatever headline they need, she said, as long as the work under it is real. And if they decide it's too risky and pull the plug, he asked, then we'll have built something real for as long as we were allowed, she said. And the people who came through those doors will hold on to that long after any contract ends. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. Careful, he said. You're starting to sound like someone who believes in more than profit. I built an empire on precision, she said. Apparently, I've been sloppy with people. Most systems are, he said. Sophia stepped closer. You two can keep rewriting corporate ethics later, she said. Right now, we have implementation timelines to draft. Darius smiled faintly. See? He said to Lauren. She gets it. You're both insufferable, Sophia said lightly. And you're both right. Let's move. They spent the next hour sketching schedules, assigning roles, mapping risks. Darius drifted easily between big-picture concepts and micro-level numbers. Lauren watched him work, seeing not just the man who saved her car in a crisis, but the leader he might have been if the world had not taken such a violent detour through his life. When the lab began to empty for lunch, Lauren and Darius found themselves alone again for a moment. You never answered Helena, she said. Not really. About joining Orion beyond 6 months. I answered as much as I could yesterday, he said. The rest depends on whether this place is somewhere I can build more than just hardware. She nodded. And this, she said, gesturing at the notebook, this initiative, that's what you really care about. It's what kept me from turning bitter enough to stop caring about anything, he said. You can't imagine how many brilliant minds I've met standing in food lines, how many equations I've heard whispered in the back of churches and shelters. He looked at his hands. They don't need a savior, he said. They need a door. And you want to be the one holding it open, she said. I just want to make sure someone is, he said. If that someone is Orion for a while, good. If it isn't, then I'll keep drawing blueprints on napkins until something sticks. She shook her head. You know, she said, if you'd led with this in the boardroom, half of them would have dismissed you as a dreamer. That's why I led with the engine, he said. The world only listens to pain and performance. If you can't show them one, you give them the other. There was something brutally honest about that she couldn't escape. Do you resent me, she asked quietly, for how I treated you in the plaza? He thought about it. No, he said. You reacted the way the system trained you to. What matters is what you did once you had proof you were wrong. She absorbed that, feeling the strange mix of relief and accountability. And what did I do? She asked. You listened, he said. Most people never make it that far. He picked up his grocery bag from the corner where he'd left it. The folded tarp was still inside. The screwdriver, the stack of diagrams he'd carried everywhere like a talisman. You know, she said, you don't have to keep that life as a souvenir. He smiled faintly. It's not a souvenir, he said. It's a reminder. Where I've been, who I met there, and what I owe them if I ever get another lab. She nodded slowly. Then don't forget, she said. When this grows, and it will, don't let it turn into just another recruiting program with nice photos and hollow promises. You're assuming I'll still be here, he said. I'm assuming you'll do the work no matter where you are, she said. I'd like Orion to be the place that didn't just use your mind and walk away. He looked at her, something like respect deepening. You're learning fast, he said. I had a good teacher yesterday, she replied. They walked out of the lab together, steps naturally falling in sync. At the elevator, she paused. You sure you don't want a room on the executive floor tonight? She asked. It's quiet, clean, no security to glare at you in the lobby. I've got a spot, he said. It's not much, but it's mine. And after 3 years of being told where I couldn't go, I like choosing where I sleep. She didn't push. Tomorrow then, she said. We start on the joint redesign in the morning. In the afternoon, we talk phase 1 of your initiative. I'll bring a list, he said. Bring names, she said. I want to know who we're doing this for. You already do, he said. You just met one of them in a plaza. The elevator doors slid open. She stepped in, then turned to face him. Darius, she said, if you change your mind about staying longer than 6 months, I'll be asking. If I don't, he said, you'll ask anyway. A genuine smile touched her face. You're starting to understand me, she said. I believe I am, he replied. The doors closed. He stood there for a moment, hands in his pockets, listening to the faint hum of the building around him. Then he turned and took the stairs instead of waiting for another elevator. Old habit. Old control. Outside, the air felt different. The city hadn't changed. The traffic still pulsed. The billboards still glowed with their hollow promises. But something in him had shifted from survival to responsibility. He pulled out his cheap phone. A new message blinked. From an unknown number. Wait, Nora. Lab 3, we'll be ready. SM. He typed back. 7:45. I'll bring coffee. He slid the phone away and adjusted the grocery bag on his shoulder. Somewhere behind him, a tower of glass and steel housed an engine that was still running because he refused to look away from a crack. Somewhere ahead of him, there were names in his notebook that needed more than his sympathy. As he walked, the camera of our story pulls back. You see the plaza where this began, now just another busy square. You see the Phantom parked quietly in a secured bay. You see a man in a suit that doesn't quite hide the strain in his posture, still carrying the same bag that kept his diagrams safe when no one else would. And if you look closely, you see something else. A woman at the top of a company, staring out her office window not at her own reflection, but at the city below, wondering how many minds are out there right now, waiting for someone to say, I can fix it, and be believed. Money taught her how to build power. Darius taught her how to use it for something else. And that is the lesson we don't hear often enough. Not every billionaire learns it. Not every discarded engineer gets the chance to teach it. But when both show up in the same story, the crack in the system becomes a doorway. If this story moved you even a little, don't let it end here. Hit like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what kind of crack in the system you wish someone would stop pretending not to see. Because somewhere out there, the next Darius is standing in the crowd saying, I can fix it, and waiting for someone with power to finally say, okay, show me.